Welcome to Behind the Bearcat. This is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with Northwest faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to hear about their career journeys, how they got to where they are, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Career Services Assistant Director Travis Klein.
And I'm Hannah Christian, the Director of Career Services here at Northwest. And today's guest on our show.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jessica Loya Gracey. I teach political science, and I'm also the chair of the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences.
Welcome.
I'm really glad you're here, and I'm really glad you said your own title because I would not have gotten that. That was a mouthful.
It's not a short title, yes.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Jessica. Let's go. Today I feel like starting way back in the history of time. Tell us about Jessica as a youth. How did you kind of find this path of becoming a political science professor?
I very much stumbled upon it. I've always been interested in politics. That's always been something that I've been really interested in. I remember when I was 10 years old on the school bus in 1988, starting a chant on my school bus for one of the presidential candidates. I was 10 years old. Nobody cared. So I've always been really interested in politics. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to major in, political science was a pretty obvious answer. I thought that I would be doing politics, and I did for a little while, and I didn't love it. So I got my dream job right out of undergrad as a campaign manager, and I hated it. I quit after 3 months. So I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I needed to pay rent, so I waited tables for a little bit. But I didn't want to do that forever.
Hold on. I want to unpack. Hold on. There's so much to unpack here. This is so juicy.
It's very scattered.
So at 10, you're leading a chant on a school bus.
Yeah.
How did you decide? So did you know from there that you were going to go to college? And then how did you make that decision of where you decided to go? And then how did you decide political science kind of in that?
Yeah. I always knew I wanted to go to college. I just love learning. So it was sort of the assumption that I would go to college. It was never really a question of whether I would. It was sort of a where am I going to go and what am I going to major in? And I am very lucky to have parents that are very indulgent and did not really care what I majored in and didn't care if it was going to be marketable later. And so they, when I decided to for a little bit, I switched my major from political science to philosophy and religion, which is very much not the most marketable degree. And they didn't care. They were fine with that. I wasn't sure initially that I would major in political science, but when I got to college, that just was the thing that made the most sense to me because I like politics. I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. I didn't really figure that out probably until my junior year of college, when I was like, well, I'm doing a lot with campaigns. And so why not do that full time? If I can do that full time, I'm graduating in an election year. Let's do that full time. So
where did you go to college?
I went to Truman State University in Kirksville. Yeah.
And did you want to go to Truman? How did you make that decision?
I was really deciding between two universities, Truman and St. Louis University, and Truman gave me more money. So that's where I went. But yeah, it was one of those places that I knew I wanted to be I grew up in St. Louis. I knew I wanted to not really be in St. Louis anymore. And so SLU was just a little too close to home. I would have probably lived on campus, but I didn't want to be just 40 minutes from my parents. I love them, but not that close. And so, I wanted to be a little bit farther away, but it's not that far from home. So I could, still go home on the weekends, but wasn't super easy to go home.
Emergency situations.
Exactly. Yeah.
So did you do any internships or any types of, you said you were working with campaigns while you were in college.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in that?
Jeff City's not that far from Kirksville, so they're.
I know, right? Yeah, so I didn't do any formal internships or anything like that, but I was really active in one of the partisan organizations on campus, and so all the local candidates, all the local elected officials, asked us to help them with their campaigns, and so we did that, and I was a vice president for that organization, and so that's kind of how I got involved in campaigning. And then my last semester,
I'm going to put a little pin in that.
Yeah.
I want people to understand that an internship doesn't have to be something that you have to go apply for like a
Right.
job. I would consider that perfectly viable internship experience. It just
Yeah.
wasn't formalized.
It wasn't yeah. I mean, if a student came to me and told me that they were doing that, and wanted internship credit for it, I'd sign off on it. So yeah, so agreed. Yeah, I definitely didn't think of it as an internship, but yeah, it was very much that kind of stuff. And then I did do a formal internship my last semester in college. I was an intern at the state capitol for one of the state legislators. So that didn't really lead to my job, but it was interesting.
Was that
Where
similar to Travis, our legislative internship?
Very similar, yeah. Of course,
Yes.
it's a further drive for our students. We're 4 hours
Yeah.
from Jeff City instead of like
Yeah.
the 30 or 40 minutes or whatever it is from Kirksville to there. So our
Yeah.
students have to live there for the spring, which is a
Yeah.
little more
Yeah.
intense, but
I
we
did
give
as
them some
well.
money to
Yeah.
help pay for that. So
Yeah.
yes, but that's a
Yeah.
very good
Very worth
program
it.
that if students are interested in, reach out to any political science professor or career services, and we will tell you all about it because we would love to
Yes.
send you to Jeff City to do that same thing. So
Yeah.
I'm curious. I was also one of those. I remember you mentioned the 88 election. I very distinctly remember, like, I went to a very small school. We did a like mock election and I was the only one that voted for the candidate I voted in my class. And I was very vocal about why everybody else was wrong.
Right.
Where do you think that like interest in politics came from at a young age? For me, I know it was my parents were very adamant about we watched the news every night and we talked about it and we had very kind of in-depth political discussions when I was like 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And none of my peers had that and they still don't. So I know that's where it came from for me. Where did it come from for you?
Yeah, same. And there's actually quite a few political science studies that show that that is pretty common when, we learn a lot from our parents, not just what our political affiliation is, but like how interested we are in politics. And so, yeah, I very much like my family was the type of family that we watched the news every night. We watched the party conventions every 4 years. We watched the State of the Union together. My mom was the one who took me to my first political rally. So, yeah, I mean, very much that is something they were not employed in politics, but they were very interested in politics. And so, yeah, it made sense that I am also very interested in politics. That's not an accident.
Okay,
It
so
always
talk to us
surprises me
about
how,
that.
oh,
Oh,
sorry. I was just gonna say it always surprises me how rare that is because I
Right.
just assumed everybody did that. And I did that with my children and they're
Yeah.
politically active too and don't necessarily even have to match up. My dad and I could not be further apart politically, but we can still talk about it and throw
Right.
things at each other. So yeah, it's rare how uncommon that is in
Yeah.
families when
Yeah.
it just seems normal. So sorry,
Yeah.
Hannah, I didn't mean to cut you off.
oh, no. I felt like I was cutting you off there. I was gonna say, so okay, tell us about your first position. How did you
Yeah.
find it? How did you get
So
it?
so I was the county coordinator for St. Charles County for the Missouri Democratic Party. And so I basically oversaw, I think it was 5 state rep races that were in St. Charles County. That's where I'm from, St. Charles County. So that's where I wanted to be. Um, and gosh, I don't quite remember. I think I applied for it through the MDP. I remember I was interning at the state capitol when I had like the interview for it because the person came to the state capitol to interview me for it. And then I found out that I got the position while I was interning there. So
I
yeah, I
mean,
guess I
being
applied
in the
for it.
capital
Yeah.
already, like,
Right.
doesn't hurt.
I know, right? Yeah. So
So what does a county coordinator do? What did you actually do in that work?
well, there's a reason I quit it after a few months. So part of the problem there was that there was one of the specific candidates in that county that was running who treated me like a high school intern. It definitely did not help that I look young for my age. And so what I was supposed to be doing was basically being the campaign manager for all 5 of those races. What I actually did was I read novels in my office all day. So yeah, it was it was not intellectually stimulating enough for me to want to stick with it. So I quit that pretty quickly. And then I got a position with Missouri Progressive Vote Coalition doing grassroots organizing, which was kind of similar. I had 2 candidates I was working with. And that actually, I did work, which was great. But then that's when I realized I didn't really like doing that work full time. So I like campaigning, part-time, volunteer, little bits here and there, but like full-time campaign work is just not me. So yeah.
So how did you go from that to becoming a professor of political science?
Yeah, it was kind of uh an a happy accident, I guess. I quit that job and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. But I liked school. I loved school. When I was in college, I was one of those people that wished I could figure out a way to stay in college forever. And I kind of did.
Mhm.
So I didn't really know what that meant. But yeah, when I quit that campaign job, I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do, but I liked school. So I guess I'll go back to school. So I initially started at the Master's in Public Administration program at University of Missouri St. Louis. Um, I didn't want to go anywhere else because I didn't want to leave St. Louis. My now husband and I had just moved in together. We just started dating. Like I didn't want to leave. He wouldn't have gone with me. We had just started dating. So I didn't want to leave St. Louis. So I started in that program. It was a good program, but it wasn't for me. It was very like hands-on how to be a public administrator in a local government. And I didn't think that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn about like the theories and stuff. And so I switched over to the master's and PhD program. So their program is a combined master's and PhD program. So yeah, I kind of happened into it. I went part-time because I still had to pay rent. So I waited tables all through grad school. So grad school took me about 10 years to get through, which is a lot longer than most people. But yeah, I like to say I took kind of the scenic route through grad school. So I made it through.
When you I'm very interested in your observation that this type of learning is not for me, but
Yeah,
this type is what I'm interested in. And it really surprises me when people say, I wasn't interested in the hands-on or
yeah,
vice versa, right? What made you understand that maybe this was, right? What was the connection between what was working for you
yeah.
rather than what wasn't?
I think I thought about what classes I really liked the most when I was an undergrad. And the classes I really liked the most were the ones that were talking about like theories of political science and like the the science-y parts of it rather than the class that I think sort of was a straw that broke the camel's back for me was a budgeting class. I mean, I know that budgeting is important in local governments. Like I like budgeting. I just don't really care about the like how to budget. But when we're talking about like theories about how to do that, like that's a lot more interesting to me. So yeah, I think it was just sort of this like, this is really hands-on. I don't know that I'm ever going to use this. I still didn't really know what I wanted to do even at that point, but I knew I didn't want to be an administrator in a local government. Like, yeah, that just kind of wasn't what I was aiming towards. And a lot of the people in those classes already were working at local governments and they just wanted more education to sort of move up. And so I was like, this isn't
On
me.
my crowd, yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So let's flip to the waiting tables part, which I kind of
Yeah.
love this part.
I love it.
So
I liked
why
waiting
waiting?
tables.
Yeah, why waiting tables? Talk to me about that.
So I did it during the summers when I would be home from college, and so I knew I liked it. I knew it was good money. So I didn't really know any other way to easily, enjoyably make money. And so yeah, I waited tables full time all through grad school. I switched to a couple different restaurants. At the end, I was working in fine dining, which was a lot nicer because it's a lot fewer hours for a lot more money. And so yeah, it's before I got this job, I was actually kind of towards the end of trying to give academia a try. That was not getting any jobs. And I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to be a restaurant manager for the rest of my life. And I was like, I don't really want to, but I would enjoy it, right? Like I did enjoy waiting tables. I did enjoy working in the restaurant industry. I just knew I'd like this more, and I do. So yeah.
So talk us
So
through that
what kind
process of how you
yeah,
came from St. Louis to
yeah.
Northwest. You came across the state. How'd that happen?
Yeah. So I was on the job market for a few years and it was kind of towards the end of working on my dissertation. So I was sort of applying for jobs every year. And the academic job market is very much this is when you apply this time of the year, and if you don't get a job by this time of the year, you're just kind of out of luck. And so I kept applying for jobs. Actually, the year before I got this job here, I had a phone interview for a job here, for a different position, a visiting position in political theory, which is not what I do. I didn't get that position, obviously, but I guess I made a good enough impression, because then the next year, when the political behavior person, that is what I do, retired, and that was an open position, I applied for that. And I got the interview. So I remember when I applied for it, I was super excited because I saw it listed, and I was like, oh my gosh, everyone. I told my friends at the restaurant, I was like, oh, the dream job that I really want got listed. I'm like, I interviewed last year, but they didn't pick me. And so I hope I get it. And then I did. Great.
So for those of us who are not aware of the difference between political theory and political behavior, can you share what that is?
Yeah. So political theory is basically like political philosophy, right? So the philosophy around political things. And that's, all important and great, but not my thing. Luckily it is Dr. Luke Campbell's thing. So he does a great job with that. I do political
Click on that video
behavior.
up there and you can hear his interview.
Absolutely. Very fascinating stuff. If you're him, I'm not interested in it. Political behavior is basically why people behave the way they do around politics, like why they vote the way they do, why they have the opinions that they do about politics, why they vote at all. So those are always the things that I'm kind of interested in.
So a little more psychology, sociology, maybe not directly, but a little bit more influenced by that.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely some subfields within political science that are very heavy on the sociology, psychology side, and that's definitely one of them. Yeah, there's lots of stuff I read from psychologists and sociologists. Yeah.
That's
Did
interesting,
you
because I think
ever?
you're like the third or fourth political science professor we've had on here. Like
Yeah.
we had Luke, we had Dr.
Yeah.
Herrera, and Bronson was very much about like the stats and kind of the math of it
Yes.
and that. And
Love it.
and it's very interesting, from someone who's outside of political science, you just think, oh, it's all political science, it's all the same thing, it's all
Right.
but there are really, just like anything else, there are so many subsections within that, like if you really excel at one part, then
Yeah.
you can go with that. But you can be a jack of all trades or a master of one, and it works either
Right.
way. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting to
Yeah.
learn that about the field when those of us who didn't really study it don't know. So
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely a big quantitative data nerd as well. I think Bronson's a little bit more of a nerd than me with that stuff, but I like data. I like playing with data. It's fun.
Did you, while you were waiting tables, ever have an inclination for teaching?
So kind of not specifically for teaching. I think it was just after a certain while, a certain amount of time in grad school, I realized there isn't much else you can do with a PhD in political science except for teach. And so I just kind of crossed my fingers and hoped that I ended up liking it. So when I was getting towards the end of grad school, knowing that I would be going on the market eventually, I hadn't taught yet. And so I knew that I should at least have some teaching experience before I start applying for jobs, because it's hard to get a job teaching if you don't have any experience teaching. And so I went to the chair of the department and I was like, is there a class I can teach coming up? Or can I TA? One of the downsides of me going part-time is that I was never funded. So I didn't have any of that TA experience that a lot of other grad students get. So I had none of that. And yeah, she was like, oh yeah, how about you teach this class on gender and politics? That's close to what you study, right? I study elections and LGBTQ plus politics, not gender and politics. But I was like, yes, absolutely. That's close enough to what I study. I will teach this class. So I was teaching this class that was cross-listed in political science and gender studies. I've never even taken a gender studies class. But yeah, I guess I did an okay job. So they asked me to teach it again the next year. So, and then my dissertation advisor hooked me up with an adjunct gig at another local college, teaching a couple classes there. So I was able to get a lot of teaching experience before I taught full time. And so yeah, that was very, very helpful. And luckily the restaurant I worked at was very accommodating to, I went down to just weekends right before I sort of got this job here. I was adjuncting like 3 different classes. And so I just worked part-time at the restaurant, and that was, yeah, kind of fun.
So, chair of the department is
Yeah.
also different from being an assistant or associate professor who's teaching and serving and doing research, right?
Yeah.
Um, what made you interested in that transition?
Um, I didn't know I was initially. I was confident that I was not interested in being department chair initially. And then Mark Corson, at our meeting, when we're like talking about Dr. Steiner comes to our meeting and is like, so here's the process of choosing a new chair. So anybody's interested. And at the meeting, Dr. Corson's like, well, I think you got to think about, what you want to offer as service to the department and selfless service and all this stuff. And I was just like, God darn it. Yeah, you're right. And so, yeah, I didn't really think I wanted to do it. But I thought, maybe this makes me sound very conceited, but I thought I'd be good at it. And so I thought I wanted to be able to help out the department and help out the faculty in my department by, doing a good job as chair. And I think I have so far, at least. And so, yeah, I didn't really think I would want to, but so far I actually really enjoy being department chair. More than I thought I would actually. So, yeah.
So, what are some of the tasks that you do as chair?
Oh, lots of paperwork and signing random things. Those are usually the easiest things of, like ad forms and degree audit exception petitions and, equivalent transfer equivalency things and, all these just little itty bitty forms that I sign off on. That's probably the easiest, and it doesn't take too much time, but it's constant in my inbox. Here's this little thing I have to sign. Um, there's also other tasks that like some of it I delegate bits to other people. So our secretary is the one who does like our course schedule, but I have to look over it to make sure like all the parts are there that need to be there. We've recently been sort of working on our department budget to make sure we still have the money we need to fund the things that we want to fund and that sort of stuff. We're just coming up to faculty evals, which I haven't done yet. So the annual reviews of all the faculty. So yeah, it's a lot more sort of varied tasks than I sort of thought. I knew sort of the big constituent pieces. It's just a whole lot more little itty bitty things. When I look at my to-do list every day, it's like all this stuff, but a lot of it is just send that email and follow up on this. And so it's small stuff, but in the end, it ends up taking some time.
And lots of meetings, I'm sure. The other
Lots
chairs
of
and directors you
meetings,
talk to.
lots of
Meetings
meetings.
are the name of the game.
Absolutely. I kind of enjoy the meetings, mostly because I really like knowing. I like knowing what's going on throughout the university, and so, I like being that person that knows the things that are going on, and then I can communicate that to the faculty in my department. And I like being part of all those meetings. Sometimes they get a little
It's a
repetitive, but
little
I still like it.
secret. Yeah. I
Yeah,
actually don't
yeah,
mind the meetings either
yeah.
because like you're like, okay, I'm out of my office sometimes, most of the time. I'm like seeing
Right.
other people. You get to share the
Yeah.
crosstalk, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
See the grandbabies, see the whatever who's got new babies, what you know, all the
Right.
things that like don't ever happen if you never see each other.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, little bits of socialization is nice than being stuck in my office all day. I mean, I like my office, but still.
So, what kind of classes are you teaching? So, you kind of touched on kind of your specialty area within political
Yeah.
science, but what are some of the, how does that translate into some of the classes that you're like actually teaching here on campus?
Yeah. So there's one class in particular that I had to give up to Dr. Herrera. So he took the class on basically like stats and stuff like that. So like how to actually research political science. So the classes that I'm teaching now are Intro to American Government. All of the political scientists teach Intro to American Government. I'm actually just teaching 2 sections of that this semester. But the other classes that I teach most regularly are state and local politics, which is a class that I didn't think I would enjoy as much as I do, but I really like teaching about it. And then elections, I have that class coming up this fall. I'm very excited about it, as always. And then I usually teach a class on race and politics as well. So, and those are pretty much the only classes that I'm sort of rotating between right now.
Any other tips and tricks, advice related to careers or searching for a job or going to grad school. You have a lot to pick from in your satchel.
Right?
So, what do
Yeah,
you
there's
feel like you need to throw out there?
yeah, I would say, from my experience, you don't have to get it right the first time. That's okay. I mean, most people don't keep the same career throughout their entire life, and there's nothing that's like that doesn't make you a failure or anything like that. I would also say, pay attention to the types of things that you really enjoy. I mean, obviously, making money is important, of course, but a lot of times enjoying the work is just as important. I don't make a ton of money working here, but the enjoyment of working here makes it worth it. I always joke about with a BA in political science. I have a lot of friends who didn't go to grad school that make a ton more money than I do because they're lobbyists or executive directors for really like big organizations, and they make, I'm sure, a ton more money than I do. But I enjoy this a whole lot more than what they're doing. So yeah, pay attention to what you like. That's really important.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate
Yeah,
it.
of course.
All right. Well, that will do it for another episode of Behind the Bearcat, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to give us a thumbs up below. That helps out. Also, if you've not done so yet, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Also, we'd love to connect with you on social media. You can find Behind the Bearcat on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Plus, the audio podcast comes out on Fridays on all the major podcast platforms. Thanks again for watching Behind the Bearcat, and as always, we'll talk to you next time.